All right, Jack, we're live. So, and live in the sense that we are recording, but we're not live anywhere. I feel like in honor of, I'm pretty much equal footing to Joe Rogan. That's pretty much fair. I think Joe Rogan moving to Austin and setting up a new studio. So this is my attempt at setting up something new.
Yeah.
It's a 1.0 work in progress. Like I was telling you, I still have like a big bookshelf, all kinds of stuff. We still have to mount a bunch of things. Ezra just sent me I gotta show. Have you seen the award that Ezra is sending out for like his like 2 Comma Club thing for Zipify?
No, I haven't seen it.
This
Good
might give you an idea
though.
for what you guys, for any stuff that you're doing for courses. Let me grab this.
Yeah,
I just
definitely.
got it in the mail today.
Nice. Yeah, no, we're thinking about we've got to figure out some sort of incentivization because we are coming out with a course builder. Damn, that thing is impressive.
So this is this we got in the mail from Ezra, and it's upside down. So that's
And
good.
so is this if you do the revenue through Zipify?
Yeah, so if you process $1 million through Zipify or through OCU, so one click upsell, this is what they send out. And then I was talking to him. I said, dude, do you have like a 10 million one, right? Or do you have, because Russell has all those. He's like, no, we just have 1 million. It's like, dude, you got to do 10 million. You got to do this. And he just texted me earlier. It's like, yeah, we have an idea for a 10 million. And then I said, if you do a 100 million, I said what you should do is you should have The Rock and John Cena like hand deliver it and then do an exhibition match at your place. If you do $100 million through OCU. And but yeah, this thing's like it's heavy too. It's
Heavy
pretty
too.
substantial.
Yeah.
Ezra has a big thing for wrestling belts. He always gives them away at like his events and his masterminds and stuff. So I got to figure out where to mount that and how to mount that. But
Well, mount that bad boy behind you.
yeah, that's going up. I told him, I said, dude, I need it because it's got to go up somewhere and just to mix things up. But yeah, so we were so anyway, new set 1.0. There's probably going to be technical difficulties or issues, and the lighting's not perfect, and it's still a little bit of a mess.
Yeah.
But-
Well, if you
but
want to
we-
compete with compete with Joe, you need to get some red panels, some lasers, some quirky little apocalypse bunker looking
It's
stuff.
weird. I posted yesterday on Facebook because I grabbed an image of it and I was like, this is interesting because I was watching the first 2 episodes and I posted and said like, what do people think of it? It's like one of the most commented posts. So people are very opinionated about it. I don't know how I feel about it. I think it's one of those things where if you're a fan of somebody, you like the norm, right? So you get used to the way they do things and the set they have and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan. I don't like the whole red wall. Like I hate that color. I think red for like it's a very
Angry.
intense color. It's like doing black walls. It's like Dwight Schrute in The Office when he became
Yeah,
manager.
yeah.
He painted his wall black, and it's like it's very intense. I'm sure he's going to make changes because I'm sure he's going to start getting like a lot of feedback from people, and he's missing a lot of the cool things he used to have in his old studio. But
There's not as much personality. You're right. Yeah. It's kind of like you don't really get to learn too much about outside of what's going on in the podcast, but maybe he wants that. Maybe he wants everything to be unopinionated and he wants just a neutral space. Because I think, just as many people probably watch it to do listen to it. So the visual is probably pretty important. And he doesn't want to create any opinions from what he's got hanging up in the background. Like if he's supporting something or not, because I know he does take on some pretty interesting topics and he's very good at staying in the middle of the fence and just not swaying towards one side or the other. So who knows? Maybe there's some strategy behind it. We don't
well,
know.
what he does, which is always really smart, is because he'll make statements and then they go viral and people like say he's endorsing a candidate or doing something, and then he'll always inevitably come on the next episode and basically say, guys, like, I'm a moron. Like I know nothing about these things. Like nobody should be listening to me or my opinion, which is kind of ironic because he like says that repeatedly all the time, yet he is incredibly influential. And
unbelievable.
and that's a weird place to be in our culture right now where it's like you have people who admittedly don't really know much about certain topics, but still have massive influence on those topics. And like just saying you're not, like I don't know anything about it doesn't stop people from listening to you. So you still like the influence is still done. And I don't know what that looks like 10 years from now, 20 years from now, where like social media becomes that much more pervasive and we have, neural implants or some crazy stuff. And it's just like Cardi B and Joe Rogan influencing the election and, deciding who becomes president.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you do this a lot, but always when it's content or ads run through celebrity or influencer accounts or pages, or you're using anything that's attached to some sort of celebrity, like the difference in performance is massive. Like when there's someone else talking about a brand and how good that brand is, the results are always 3 to 4 times X better than it is if a brand's talking about themselves. So you can really see how influencer marketing kind of got so out of hand, and how it's so expensive now to get people who have the attention to mention your product essentially. But I think the other thing is you've just got to have a really good product, and those guys who naturally get featured by these celebrities and that sort of thing, that's even the next level above that. But the power that influencers have now over what people buy, what people do is insane. And as you said, even if these people aren't the experts on a topic, they can still influence all of the people involved in that topic to go and make a decision or buy something. And it's kind of scary as well, because it could probably get misused quite easily too, because everybody's got a price.
It's scary. It's scary both ways, right? Like it's scary on the positive side of things, which is, holy crap, Joe Rogan just mentioned my product or my candidacy or whatever. But then it's the other way, which is like, I don't know if you saw, I think it was a few weeks ago, Josh from Snow, there was this girl on TikTok who went viral with like a Snow teeth whitener. And it was like just a disgusting thing of her like pulling out her mouth and just like drool pulling out, and it went viral and got like 40 million views. And it's like not a good reflection of his brand. He's come out and said like, yeah, like we didn't pay her, like we didn't tell her to do anything. It's not like what we wanted somebody to do, but it still went viral. And that's the other weird thing with influencers is like you can also have influencers like using a product or talking about a product in a very negative connotation, or they could be somebody who like your customer base doesn't like. Like it's the whole, Ellen DeGeneres George Bush moment where she, was sitting with him at a baseball game, and all of a sudden Ellen's now like, a crazy conservative because she was sitting with George Bush. And it's like this association makes a statement and people read into it. It's a very weird time. It's like, it's very, very weird. And I don't know how I feel about it. I'm very torn about social media and like everything we kind of use on a daily basis, because it's like, it's added so much value to our lives, right? It's given a lot of us like a voice and a platform, and there's so much of an inherent benefit, but it's also such a vortex of awfulness and hate. It's just like this never ending black hole of just attention sucking, dopamine addiction that people need to be on all the time. And it's become more about me posting something or sharing something to get the desired result, which is the engagement, versus me posting and sharing something because I think it's actually the right thing to post or share. I think it's actually going to help somebody. And that's hard as a marketer and an entrepreneur, just a human being, to remedy those two things.
Yeah, well, the gamification aspect is brilliant on social media, and I think it has leveled the playing field. You don't have to have a massive media conglomerate to, make a change or voice an opinion or, stand up for something that you believe in, that sort of thing. So I think the media is a lot more, like the barrier to entry is lowered. But unfortunately, that's introduced more people, and there's so much more noise now. So instead of people getting their information from, like a handful of sources, you're now getting that information from thousands of sources. And so now I think the next stage is how do you validate, or how do you kind of start aggregating some of that information, and how do you know what to believe now? Because, the deep fakes and then the fake news and all this sort of stuff is just, this crazy issue that's come out because people are just blindlessly following whatever someone who they follow and admire says. And so I think it's one of the issues that I think is definitely going to have to be addressed, and there's going to have to be some sort of credibility or sourcing or some way that we can start, differentiating high quality content and news versus lower quality content and news, because unfortunately, most people believe what they read on the internet, even though that could literally be anybody sitting in a room typing that up and putting it on Wikipedia or creating a YouTube video, creating a Facebook video, whatever it may be. So it'll be interesting to see how, the big four tackle that. They're constantly trying to figure out a way to validate people, constantly trying to increase transparency. But it's really hard, because on one side you've got these guys running these massive companies trying to enforce some stuff, and on the other side you've got tens of millions of people trying to gamify and beat that system. So I don't know, it's an interesting space to be in, and I think security is going to be much bigger. Validation and credibility sources, that sort of thing, is going to be much bigger. So there's a lot of exciting industries that I think are going to get much bigger over the next 5-10 years.
Yeah, I think there'll be industries that you can't even foresee, and this is something I talk about with like any discussion I have with smart friends of mine who are kind of on the more futurist side. They're talking about like the future of work and technology and innovation and what our world looks like 20 years from now, 50 years from now, 100 years from now. There's this belief that if we continue to move down this path towards more dependence on AI and robotics and machine learning and all these, basically computers, that you displace tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of people out of the workforce, and you end up with just a society of people who do nothing all day but like just sit around like Ready Player One and just live in a virtual world. And I think it's a possibility, right? Like I think that's definitely a possibility. We could end up like that. I think the more likely scenario is that there's industries that pop up that we're not even like aware of yet. We can't even foresee them because there's certain technologies that haven't been invented yet. It's like if you went back 50 years ago and you told anybody in the street in America or anywhere in the world, and you said, hey, in 50 years from now, most of the country is going to be employed by companies that produce nothing. What they actually do is they write these ones and zeros that then is able to turn these boxes into whatever they want, and people use them to talk. Like it's so foreign. People never even foreseen that. Like when the internet happened, that was a fear, right? It's, this internet thing is going to put all these brick and mortar businesses and local, it's all these industries that are going to be displaced and people will be unemployed forever. It's like, no, there's whole new sectors that open up. Like there was the whole gig economy that was created. That's created all these jobs for, delivery drivers and everything else. And it's easy to kind of cater to fear and be like, hey, this is really scary, and so we should stop it. But the other side is like stopping innovation usually isn't the right move, and nor does it work. Like you can't really stop people from innovating or moving. That's like impossible. At least in our country. I mean, there's countries where it's definitely possible. Right? Certain countries where like, if you do this, we will arrest you and throw you in a labor camp, which is, one of the things I think is great about America is like that doesn't happen. But yeah, it's interesting times. And I know you're doing a lot of cool new stuff, and I know are you out in California now? Is that where you're at? Because we were talking, you're looking for a new place.
Yeah. So, I'm based in LA, and then, during COVID, we've just been bouncing around to kind of like different Airbnbs. We'll get a bunch of like 5 to 10 people together. We'll all do kind of like these working retreats. So we'll do like a week here, a week there. So at the moment we're in Tahoe, and, I'm outside because everybody has got a room pretty much booked with a call. And so, we kind of just have been using this to actually just get out of the city. And it's been really good because we've created some really strong connections with a bunch of people. When you're living with someone for a week and you're both kind of in your regular day to day, you're both working, that sort of thing. You create like these really interesting relationships with a bunch of people who, you probably wouldn't have done this with prior to this. So I think that's been a great benefit of it. And so we keep doing these like probably every few weeks. We'll do that. But yeah, I was talking about, how crazy the economy is right now, especially in Los Angeles, where you have this weird thing where, everything's shut down. The economy's kind of on the downhill. There's people losing their jobs, that sort of stuff. But then you have the stock market that just is going full force, straight up and to the right. And then you've got the housing market, which is also pretty crazy, because we were talking prior to this about, you moving into your new house and everything, and how it is a struggle to get together the down payment. But yeah, in Los Angeles, it's unbelievable. Like the housing market is through the roof with those low interest rates, and the wanting and the need to kind of get your own house and get out of that apartment so that you can actually get some fresh air and go outside, because you don't have your regular sort of coffee shop you go to, or you don't go see people in public spaces anymore. So yeah, it's just a really weird storm that has been created that is very hard to understand and very hard to predict where it's going to go next.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about that. So but before I do that, like, tell me. So this is a serious question, and it could be it's definitely a dickish question to an extent. But like, what is it about California? Like, I just I'm an East Coast person my entire life, and I've been to California so many times. And listen, I get it. It's a beautiful place, and it's a place where it's pretty much consistently the same weather all year round, which is great. But on the flip side, like, it's the whole state just keeps burning. It's like these wildfires are crazy, and every single year it's getting worse and worse and worse. Like, I forget which fire right now, but it's like basically the size of Connecticut or Rhode Island. Like, the fire is like the size of another state. And then just the cost of living, like, I'm just, it's a serious question. Like, I get there are benefits. It's just, I'm always curious because I have plenty of friends that live in California and love it. But I'm curious for you, because you're looking at a place in LA and stuff. So what is it specifically about like California that like, hey, this is like, I'm cool paying, this premium to live here?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a very valid question. For me personally, I've always grown up living next to a beach. Yeah. So for me, it's definitely the ocean, being able to go surfing, the sunshine most of the year. So that aspect is, right down my alley. But at the same time, I could move back to Australia and get that for a fraction of the cost. But no, it's a really interesting time right now, because you do have California, heavily taxing people, looking at imposing, asset tax, all these crazy things that they want to do to try and keep taxing to make it more and more, I suppose, livable for all classes. And obviously the government can't pay for stuff unless they collect tax on it. And so they just keep pushing the tax higher and higher. And I think they're probably going to find that a lot of people will get to that tipping point where the perks of California don't necessarily match with the expense of it. So I've already been talking with a few friends who are actually moving out. They're moving to Nevada. They're moving to Washington. Some of them moving to Florida, Texas, all of these places that have no state income tax. Just because it's gotten to the point where it's just like, okay, well, this financially isn't a big enough benefit for me to stay here. And so I would say for me, it's definitely the lifestyle that I'm willing to pay for. But if you're not into the beach and you don't need it, if you're happy like with, weather patterns and 4 seasons, you definitely don't need to pay for it. But I can definitely see the appeal of not living in California. Definitely Southern California. I don't know why people live Northern California. Like that, you miss out on all the perks.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at and why I'm looking at staying here. But on the same side, I've got a lot of friends who are moving out as well, just because they're like, I'm at that breaking point, not worth it anymore. I'm happy to move.
It's an interesting, I think that the social experiment of these different states, right? It's like, it's kind of what's happened with COVID and stuff, where it's each state has kind of tried something different. And I think it's the same thing when you think about just like how states are run. California is I think the 5th or 6th largest economy in the world. So, I mean, it's pretty much like a country, and it's each of these states kind of runs a little differently in terms of how they collect revenue and how they handle taxation and how they handle, spending and all this stuff. And I think you get some of these states like New York and California have had this kind of luxury for a very long time of being such desirable locations that have such, like, California with obviously the weather, with Silicon Valley, New York being, with Manhattan, where you have just all this talent that aggregates there, and you have great weather for, California and all these other benefits. And so they're able to push and push and push the wealthy people who live there because they're making so much money. But at some point, there's a tipping point. Like, I think there's a number where once you tax people at a certain amount, and once the people see it's not being run and it's being mismanaged, and that quality of life for like the poor, because like you look at California, it doesn't. And again, I don't live there, I don't have that much of experience, but just from what I see from the outside and just knowing people who know a lot about it, like it seems like things like homelessness and stuff are getting worse. It seems like a lot of the problems are getting worse, which is like, if I was a wealthy individual in California or New York, I think if I saw the fruits of my labor in terms of like my taxation actually improving the quality of life of others, I'd probably be more likely to say this is okay. I think that's always been the problem with taxes. Like, there's no transparency. Like if a bunch of like really, really like famous behavioral economists and people in psychology and stuff have talked about this. If like the government just started being transparent about like exactly what your tax dollars do and the results that it gets, people would be a lot more like welcoming to the tax man. Like if I knew that, hey, $10,000 of my taxes, it went last year to help, rebuild public schools across the country and improve. And then by doing that, actually graduation rates increased 20%, like things like that. Like that's amazing. Like, I feel like I'm making an impact.
Yeah.
Instead, it just goes into
to contribute.
It just goes into this black hole where it's like, did all my tax dollars just go to like Raytheon or some military contractor, or did it go to some weird project where they're studying shrimps on treadmills, which is an actual like government program that happened a few years ago. And same with California. It's like you have, the homelessness problem, and you have the problems that just are getting worse and worse and worse, and they're taxing more and more and more. And at some point, people are like, every year I pay you more, and things seem to be getting worse. So either the money's not going where it's supposed to be going, or you're just really, really bad at managing as, mayors and governor, managing this state, this business essentially. But yeah, I think we're at the tipping point, especially with COVID, especially with people realizing that, hey, I can run my business, I can work from Zoom. Like, I don't necessarily need to be in Manhattan or Silicon Valley. To Google, Facebook, all these companies now are saying they're staying remote for another year, 2 years. Like, so do you really need to be in these locations where you used to have to be, because that's where the high paying jobs were? But now it's like, hey, I can work for Amazon or Google or Goldman Sachs and not live in a place where my cost of living is 5-10 times higher than the average, and bank a lot more cash, save a lot more money. It'll be interesting. I'd like to see if Manhattan and San Francisco and some of these cities recover. Like a part of me thinks like they don't look the same, at least for the next few years. Maybe over time, because obviously New York looked very different in the 80s than it does today. But for the next few years, I don't see the wealthy returning, and I don't see like business going back to usual. I think there's gonna be so many businesses that are just completely wiped out. All these bars, restaurants that are just done. Like, you're just gonna have a ton of vacancies. You're gonna have a ton of open space. That it's not gonna be good for at least a few years.
Yeah, well, I think you're way more into the political game than me. I'm not. I can't even vote, so
Who cares?
I haven't got too much into it. But yeah, when I just even compare the mentality to paying tax in the US compared to like Europe or Australia or these other places, people seem to be much more opposed to paying tax in the US and put way more effort into decreasing that tax than some of these other economies like Australia and Europe. Like, we're here with a guy who's like works with an esports gaming company. He's from Denmark, And yeah, he's like, yeah, it's just we pay crazy high taxes. Everybody's fine with it because all of our facilities are super nice.
Yeah.
The public transport's amazing, the school's amazing, the schooling's free, healthcare is free. Like people are like, okay, well, we know that our money is getting utilized really well, and that's why we live such a high quality of life. And so even though that's a little bit higher than what we could get if we were to like move somewhere, we know if we move somewhere, the quality of life is going to drop. So people are much more open to paying those taxes just because they can physically see the impact that it's having. I think you hit it on the head, whereas like, the tax keeps going up and you have no idea, where it's going because like what you can directly see seems to be going in the wrong direction. So it's not often that you pay more and the results get worse. So I don't know, it's hard to tell and it's hard to get into. I'm sure it's so much more complex than the surface level stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I think another big issue is a lot of these companies are going to realize that everybody can go remote, and they're going to start looking at like, do I have to even hire someone in America? What are all these other countries that are a fraction of the price charging, and what sort of quality can I get from those? And then you're going to start seeing jobs shift away from America because, maybe these people have gone fully remote, or these companies have gone fully remote. And they've realized like, okay, great, we need like a few American managers, but some of these positions that are with America right now, we can actually outsource somewhere else for a fraction of the price. So I think that's going to be a risk as well to the economy. And also with people kind of dispersing a lot, if you don't have like some sort of unique aspect to what you do or some incredible value that you deliver, I think it's going to be hard because, I think companies will look to replace their current workforce with something that's more efficient, something that's cheaper, or something that's better quality. So, I think everybody going remote also might have a negative impact on the average, day to day and the average American citizen, which is a little bit worrying because you do like to go into a job where you meet people, you see people, you create that personal relationship and that personal bond. And that's the value that you create because you create culture. Whereas culture is now sort of taking a back seat because everybody's remote, and it's very hard to create that culture, that relationship when it's just over Zoom, or when you don't see what's going on outside of Zoom and you don't get to learn like, a little bit more about that person and become a friend with that person. So I think, it's really changing. I don't know if it's for the better. And I think there's going to have to be some sort of hybrid between, maybe it's a 3-day workday, 3-day office workday, 2-day from home. And, that relationship is going to be really important because, it's something that's very hard to replicate online. And if it does shift away, jobs might go overseas for sure.
Yeah. And I mean, at the end of the day, like what it comes down to is the long-term health ramifications of what we're doing right now. Like, I think that's been like totally undervalued and under discussed is like what happens to the average person when they don't socialize for a year plus. Like the average person,
the mental
like,
impact, yeah,
that is no longer like going to the office every day and seeing their coworkers. It's no longer going out to dinner. It's no longer doing all these activities, going to sporting events, that literally spending most of their day inside their home or their apartment on their computer screen, and almost all their socialization happens virtually. Like there are 100% going to be like 5, 10, 20 years from now, research, like studies done of like what's happening now that are going to uncover all kinds of crazy. I'm confident of it, especially in kids. Like, you have all these kids that are just like, they're, doing school
getting homeschooled
at home.
Yeah.
It's like everything is, you're just, a bunch of little kids sitting on a computer screen all day, not seeing their friends, not spending time with them. Like there are definitely going to be some big consequences to that. And I hope that we transition, like you said, to some type of a hybrid before behaviors change. I think there's still like a window of time before people's behaviors like change pretty permanently, but it's a really short window. Like it doesn't take that long for people to like become the new normal, where it's like now going to the office seems like work, and it's now a new habit I got to learn. It's like leaving the house, because that's going to be a hard thing to change. is like short of
Yeah.
something major happening. Like the virus obviously changed behavior pretty dramatically, pretty quickly.
And quickly,
That's
yeah.
because there was this massive death pandemic that was every minute, every second, every day was going to kill us, and that's what it was being pit. And that people when they're afraid, they make concessions really, really fast.
Yeah, well, the other thing is, what we found. So we work with, we've seen behind the scenes of a bunch of companies on all the different things that we do. And, what we're seeing on a lot of cases is that the productivity is actually going up. People are working longer hours, they're working more, they're getting more done right now. And, that's great. But at the same time, like, you talk to those people and they haven't socialized with anybody. They haven't left their room. They haven't kind of done anything but work. And now the expectation is that you are available and online 24/7.
Yes.
Because people are like, okay, well, what else could you possibly be doing right now? You're supposed to be at home quarantining. You're not supposed to be doing anything apart from sitting in front of your computer and working. So I think that's also a dangerous norm to set, that there is no off time, because you really need to recharge your batteries every now and again to be happy, to be creative, to be in a good mental state to do your best possible work. So I think that's another negative to all of this, that nobody's quite realizing. And, that's definitely a big cultural thing as well, coming from Australia and looking at the American workforce. Like, the hustle is crazy over here. Whereas in Australia, if you contact someone on the weekend about work, they're like, yeah, no, I'm not going to talk to you till Monday. Because they're like, yeah, this is my weekend, I'm going to enjoy it. And then I'll deal with that on Monday when I'm supposed to be dealing with it. Whereas here, it's like, if there's someone and they don't hear back in 20 minutes, they'll be like ringing you and texting you and blowing you up. And it's like, man, I've got stuff that I'm doing right now. And, that's kind of a shitty life to lead if you're going to have to be on call with all your coworkers or your boss and be responding within 15 minutes. Otherwise, it's a fire.
Yeah. I mean, we had to put that, like, back when we did more agency work. Hoki wants to come up here. Back when we did more agency work, like, we had to start putting that into our discussions with clients. Say, listen, our team is available during these hours. We're not available on the weekends, because it is this thing where it's a really slippery slope with Slack and instant communication where, hey, everything's an emergency. Everything needs to be done now. But the reality is, I mean, like, up until probably, 10, 15 years ago, when email and things weren't, and text messaging wasn't really becoming a mainstream thing, like, things got done, right? Like, businesses operated. There were all the same companies did great work. The economy moved forward. Like, people were effective at their job without needing to be on call 24/7, right? We're not all surgeons like that. I think that's the big thing, is like prioritizing work and what's really an emergency and what can wait. Like, if you're a brain surgeon, hey, you get a call at 2 a.m. on a Saturday because some guy was in a pile up and needs emergency brain. Like, that's an emergency, right? That woman needs to be on call. Hey, this one ad has a poor ROAS. Like, I need to look at it on Sunday afternoon. Do you? Like, you're not. Things aren't going to go down the hole in 12 hours, 24 hours. Like, your business will be there tomorrow, and if it isn't there tomorrow, then there's a bigger problem. And me not changing the ads was not the reason. If something that bad happened in such a short period of time. But it's the expectation of always being available and always needing to do work. I feel like now everybody's kind of getting a taste of, like, what it's like to be an entrepreneur. I think the rest of the country now all lives entrepreneur hours, but they have no upside. So it's like they're working the hours that we have to work, but they're still just 9 to 5 employees technically, which is a really shitty thing for most people.
Yeah, well, we still do. We still have like an agency, but then we also have software. And the difference between a customer and a client is crazy. Like, customers are just so much easier to deal with than clients. But you obviously need to have a certain amount of customers, and you obviously need to have systems in place. And the software side of things makes it a lot more scalable than an agency side of things where it's one-to-one, whereas the software side of things is one-to-many. So I think a lot of agencies, or from the people that I've been talking to, a lot of them have kind of thought about, like, okay, well, I'm doing this agency work, I'm helping all these companies, how do I create something myself, whether it's software, whether it's my own e-commerce store? How can I kind of get out of this kind of one-to-one and figure out how to go one-to-many and focus on customers, not clients? I think that's an interesting change that has been happening recently. And we're definitely diversifying a lot over those two, which has been, a good, healthy balance to finding a happy medium between not being stressed out about losing clients and also not being stressed out about, servers going down. So you have kind of like a balance there. And I think a lot more agency owners need to think about, okay, like, I see behind, like, I have so much valuable information. You see behind the scenes on so many different companies. There's so much you can learn from these. There's so many problems you can identify. Think about how you can actually build products for solutions to those problems, not just continue the grind, week after week, working on client work. Think about the big picture, not just the, tomorrow's results and the next invoice that you're going to send out.
Yeah, I think I think what's happened is there's been such a influx of agency creator, people starting agencies, the social media marketing agency, the local lead gen agency, the media buying agency, because it's a very, very easy and effective way to start making decent money, right? So I think starting agency is probably one of, if not the easiest way, if you're like thinking about getting into the world of entrepreneurs or marketing, to like build financial independence, to get off your 9 to 5, because like even on the low end, if you're charging $2,000 a client, like you get 5 small businesses to hire you, like that's it's a $10K a month, gig. That's $120K a year that you're making. Like that's a pretty good gig there. The problem though is that people don't know when to switch, right? They continue to move down that path and they don't think beyond it. It's like, okay, I needed to do this because I needed to get those base levels, kind of Maslow's hierarchy in place. But now I have those things, but I'm still doing this. And they become very, very unhappy because like and I'm sure you're the same way, I've yet to talk to an agency owner who's like, you know what I love? I love having a business that every single day I have clients bitch at me because this month our ROAS went down 5% and we only made them $50,000 a month instead of $75,000 a month. Like it's a thankless job. You barely get thanked when you crush their business and do really well. And then as soon as something goes bad, you're the person they blame and they want to quit and all this stuff. And the churn, there's so many downsides to it. And what people should be doing is like what you're doing, what we've done, use that cash flow to build assets, to build things you own. Like you're working so hard right now. If you have an agency, you are working 24/7 grinding to build somebody else's asset, to build somebody else's dream. Like that's what you're literally doing. It's every day you and your team are going into work and you're busting your ass and putting in blood, sweat, and tears to build somebody else's Shopify business, to build somebody else's SaaS company, somebody else's course business. And whether it's 3 months from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, they're going to fire you because they're going to go to the grass is greener, find somebody different. And you're going to be at zero. And they now have a business that's worth $10 million, $20 million, $50 million. Like if you actually think about it, it's kind of crazy if that's all you're doing. But like, I think what you guys are doing is really smart, which is, hey, we learn a lot on the agency and then we implement what we learn and what we know. We use that kind of as an educational like testing ground and as a cash flow machine. And then we put that into our SaaS businesses and other businesses and we scale those and we own those. That's a real property of ours that if we wanted to, we could sell and we could exit and get an influx of cash. I'm curious if there's a point in time where you see yourself stopping the agency entirely.
I don't know. Like, I think, I don't know. It's just like an amazing instant cash flow. And it's very hard to, as you said, like, it's very hard to make that much money that quickly. Whereas SaaS is so much harder than you think it's going to be. And it takes so much longer than you think it's going to take. So I don't know if I'm going to get to I suppose we probably will get to a point where we're just like, okay, well, the size of our SaaS stuff is just like so much greater than the agency side. It doesn't make sense to deal with the agency stuff anymore, and we should just 100% focus on the SaaS stuff. But at the same time, I'm putting kind of like teams and people in place to sort of manage that agency so that it still keeps generating stuff. Because, you know, the good thing is like once you're in that industry of like e-commerce and agency world and that sort of thing, you do get to meet some really interesting people and some really interesting things. Like some of the founders we meet are great. Some of the investors in the companies we work with are awesome, and does open up a lot of gateways. So it's similar to how you have a podcast, really. Like the podcast, you can't measure the exact ROI that it's giving you. And it might be a lot of work, but the opportunities it opens are really, really good. So I don't know if it'll ever stop or not. I suppose it will just depend. If you know, our new SaaS turns into, you know, $100 billion company, then yeah, I'm definitely not running an agency.
Well, let's say like tomorrow you sold Viper for like 50 million. Would you still keep your agency, or would you like go all in on your own businesses, your own SaaS companies and product companies?
I'd probably hire someone to just fully manage the agency, and then I would take a very small stake, just to keep the wheels churning on that, but just have very little involvement, and then go and build my next asset. Because the thing is, I think, you know, you want to build a large collection of assets, because the assets is what generates the revenue. And the problem with cash is you can sell something, you get that cash, but that cash is very easy to lose when you make a bad decision or something. If you have something that's working, that's just generating cash month after month, you know, you don't necessarily just want to sell that. You want to keep that cash flow going. And $50 million right now, like, you know, you could easily automate a lot of that agency stuff. You could put in like sales staff, CEOs, managers, all that sort of stuff to deal with that. And then you would obviously have a really good chunk of change left for the new SaaS product that we're working on to invest and hire and build out a big dev team and that sort of thing. But I don't know. I think it's always going to be there until I'm just like, this is too much of a headache. But if I can have like a really good team in place, and I have some really good people, then that's not really a headache anymore. Because, you know, one of the biggest things we've learned with building an agency is just like the people in it are just so important. If you have a good team, you're going to be happy, everything's going to work, and, you know, the wheels are going to move in the right direction. Whereas if you have a few bad eggs in there, it's really hard, and every day there's issues, every day there's problems, and it makes it really hard to keep going. So really investing in your people is super important. You know, just like being a nice person to them, which sounds ridiculous, but there's so many like people who come over from, you know, other agencies or other positions. And they're like, yeah, it was just like, I was just treated badly. You know, my ideas weren't heard. You know, I was always getting yelled at, whatever. Just being a nice person also goes such a long way in that service industry. So I think, you know, I'm getting on a massive tangent here.
But, this is great. There's no agenda in this. We talk about whatever we want.
But yeah, I think, you know, if you can create that really good business, then keep it. If you can automate it and replace yourself, do that. If it's just too much of a pain and it's impossible for you to leave it, or it's just causing too many headaches, sell it and use that money to build something better. But yeah, don't break something that's not working. Don't sell something that's working. And I think it's all about building assets so that you diversify your risk and you can easily sleep at night. Like if I put my $50 million into one venture and I was like, okay, this is a make or break, you know, I'd be stressed out all the time. Whereas when you diversify your income off multiple streams, you have a much better peace of mind. You can think more strategically. You are in a much better mental state to make decisions. So I think that peace of mind is worth it as well. Like there's always a fallback.
Yeah, I think the concept of diversification is something not a lot of people, at least the majority that get into our industry, do very well, because if one thing is working, people get very, very glued to that thing and they fear losing it. I also think the people prematurely diversify, and they diversify before they have systems in place. So like what you said is logical and it makes sense, which is, hey, I can put an infrastructure in place over here and fully automate this business, put in its own CEO, and I own a chunk of it, but I don't operate it. And now it's going to grow and thrive on its own independently. And now I can do these other things. This is a problem we had early on. We made this mistake a bunch of times, was we would build something, it would do really well. Then we'd get bored and see something cool we wanted to do. We'd go do that. And the thing that we were doing that was doing well went like this, and this thing went like this. And then we would have to go back to and it was just a seesaw. So we weren't building layers. We were just moving where our money was. We basically putting time in one thing, then our revenue shifted to that thing. And that's a slippery slope, because then people are like, oh crap, this thing's failing, got to go back to it. And then the thing they put the work into now craps out. And you end up on this kind of hamster wheel where you're just going back and forth, and you're not growing. You're just like trying to keep the balloon in the air essentially before it falls down. But people don't like it. Building a team is not easy, and it's not cheap, right? That's the other big thing. Is like, once you start hiring people, once you start putting things in place like matching 401k plans and health insurance and dental and all that stuff, like you're now on the hook for a lot of money. It's not just you, right? It's like you have a bad month and you're a sole prop. Like
stakes are raised.
It's not that big of a deal. You have a bad month and you have a big payroll. Like, you got to pay that. Like, you can't just take a month off, right? It's not like you, where you can just say, hey, I can go a month without a paycheck. And that's a hard decision for a lot of people to make. And a lot of people don't make it, and they kind of push it off. And they just stay like this. Like, I see a lot of people that are just at the same level year after year after year, or going downwards after one big hit, because they don't invest in actually developing something.
Yeah, it's hard because it's a lot of work. Like, it's 12 plus hours a day in most cases, 6, if sometimes 7 days a week. Like, it's a ton of work to build teams, build businesses, and start all this sort of stuff. And it's fine if you don't want to do that. Like, I know plenty of friends who just have like a good steady position at a job, and they're crushing it in their job. They've got a great wage. They're getting a little bit of shares and equity. And, they unplug every time they leave. They don't have to think about anything. And their day is 9 to 5, and that's it. That's cool too. You can really just depend on which path you want to take. Like, so many people who become entrepreneurs probably shouldn't become entrepreneurs. And so many people that are at companies probably should become entrepreneurs. It's really hard balance. And I think everybody's different. Depends on your personality type, depends what you want to do. Like, if you're just looking to kind of get rich, like, entrepreneurship isn't great for that. Like, most entrepreneurs aren't rich. Most entrepreneurs are just like passionate about what they're doing. They're trying to solve a problem, that sort of thing. And then some of them get lucky. Some of them create a great product. They create a great solution, and then, they make a lot of money from it. But there's a lot that don't as well. So you just got to really think about what you want to do, and you've got to be willing to do what you do and not think about the money that you're getting for it. So if you get up and you're like, yeah, I'm excited about this, whether that's going to a job or whether it's building your own company, both of those are correct answers. Is what are you excited to do when you get up in the morning? If you're at a job and you're like, I really hate this, I wish I had something else, then probably the job's not for you. Maybe try entrepreneurship. If you wake up as an entrepreneur and you're like, God, I can't be bothered dealing with all these problems today, go and take a job where you don't have to deal with problems like that every day. It is hard to make that shift, and for sure it's scary as well. So many people say just jump off and do one or the other. I'm 100% against that. I'm like, stay at a job, start some side hustle, see how you like it, don't fully commit. Same with entrepreneurship. Keep your freelance work while you're building something up until you can fully sustain it. I'm not a huge fan of when people say like, oh yeah, just quit everything and put your heart and soul, everything into this one venture, because the failure rate on new ventures is very high.
Yeah, it's definitely high. I think where people mess up is they do things in terms of starting a business primarily for money, not because they actually are passionate about what they're doing. And that makes it a lot harder, right? It's already hard enough to do what we do. It's already hard enough to spend year after year after year working 7 days a week, all day long, and struggling and barely scraping by to finally make it when you love what you do. But doing that when you actually, like, the only reason you're doing it in the first place is because you heard it was a good idea or a good market to get into, or a product that's viral, like that's I think one of the big mistakes I see a lot of people make is they jump in, they pick it based on the what their market research told them, or what they think would be good. But it's like, what are you passionate about, right? What gets you really excited? What gets you really fired up? What do you love doing? What industries do you love? What hobbies do you have? Like, there's opportunities everywhere, right? There are opportunities to disrupt every industry. Build something around that. Like it becomes a lot easier to work those hours when you're having fun. I definitely couldn't do what I do if I actually didn't have fun doing it. And anytime we've been in a position where I've felt like I'm doing work, we've discussed it as a team and like gotten rid of those projects or those clients or those businesses, frankly, that we're working on. If we don't enjoy doing it and we're not having fun doing it, what's the point of doing it? Like, it's that the whole point of entrepreneurship, in my opinion, is not to make money. It's one, to do something you love, and two, to have, a massive impact. I think those are two of the bigger things. And if you're not doing those two things, like you're not really, an entrepreneur. You're not really doing what like true entrepreneurs do. Like, you look at any success story, the big players, like they built businesses that they loved, and were able to work those hours because it was fun. They were building something exciting, something visionary, something game changing, and that's I think something that if people were getting into it, took that approach a little more, I think the success rate would be a little. It's still, most are still going to fail. Like that's just inevitable. But I think people would quit less frequently, and they would quit less early. They put a little more work in and push past some of the hurdles because they'd actually be having fun and not just be like, this sucks. Like, why am I'm not making money yet, and I hate what I do, and I have to work these long hours. Like, this is not what I thought entrepreneurship was all about.
Yeah, well, I would say, like, in terms of us, like, Viper, we kind of struggled and failed for the first year. It wasn't until year 2 and year 3 that we sort of started, like, getting some good traction with it. And then with this new product, Hiax, we've even just been in development for the last, 8 months. So I think the other thing is like the persistency, or you've got to be persistent to follow through with some of this stuff, because it doesn't happen overnight. Like, all of these overnight success stories, they're not overnight success stories. That's like, this is their 3rd business and they learned so much in their first 2 businesses or something. Or, this is what you've seen on the launch date. You didn't see all of the work that happened before the launch. Yeah. So I think the other thing is, being persistent as well is massive. If we'd quit after year 1 on Viper, we would have lost so much money and time. And I'm sure a lot of people get to that point, they're just like, this isn't working. But because, it was kind of in our space, we do marketing, we wanted to build marketing products and marketing services to help businesses grow. It was still of interest to us to keep going and keep doing and keep improving. And, the persistent thing was like, one of the key factors in that turning into a successful company, really, because it quite easily could have not been.
When did you know? Like, was there a point in time with Viper specifically that you were like, probably not going to quit now? Like, this is like something's working.
Yeah, I would 100% say it's the tipping point is when you can actually take like a decent paycheck and still cover your expenses and still have enough in the bank. Because for, the first, I would say 6 months, we were working part-time on it. The next 6 months, my co-founder, he was working full-time. I was still working part-time. And then we kind of got to year 2 where we could finally start paying ourselves and, making enough money to comfortably have that as our income. And then from year 2, that's kind of when we could invest more time into it, and when we could reinvest back into it as well and dedicate more attention to it. So that's when it sort of started to snowball into a more successful company. And, we hit a lot of roadblocks too. Things change in the environment, which, definitely negatively impact us. And, you have a decision at that point when you take like, a 30% hit on your MRR or whatever. You take that hit, and then you have the choice to either quit or to try and solve that problem and keep going on. So, I would say, yeah, once you can fully go full time on it and you can take a decent wage for yourself and not worry that you're not investing enough back in, I think that was the point in which we were like, okay, this is probably going to be, something that we can continue with.
That makes sense. And we had the same benchmark for Hiax and other companies. Now that like you no longer necessarily need to pull cash from those businesses. Like from a more technical standpoint, is there something that you look at, whether it's like number of users, whether it's monthly recurring revenue, that you're like, hey, if we hit this, we think this is a sticky product that's probably gonna work.
It's mostly talking to your customers, actually. If your customers, if you talk to them and they're like really excited, they love it, they love you, they love the product, that's one indicator. So talking to your customers is really important. And then, you obviously do have a ton of metrics that you can go off. So you've got like, churn, MRR, monthly recurring revenue, that is. You've got all of these usage factors. So how much is your tool being used, or is it being benchmarked? Benched, essentially. I don't know what to call that. It's a baseball term.
Yep, bench is good.
And are people excited to use it? So that's one of the big things. And I think with Hiax, we have a way higher standard that we need to be at, just because it's the second product. So now there's a bit of an expectation of delivering a good product. When we first delivered Viper, it was so MVP, it was ridiculous, barely worked. And that was fine to launch with because we didn't have anything. It was our first attempt. There was no expectations. Now there's an expectation of like delivering relatively good software. So we have to put a much higher standard onto that. And it has taken a lot longer to develop. We're also going after a bigger market. So, viral giveaways, contests, and reward programs is a relatively small market in comparison to going after things like competing with Shopify, Wix, Thinkific, and all these other guys like ClickFunnels and stuff. You have to have a much better product to compete with those guys than you do to compete in the giveaway space, for example.
Yeah. So, when you reach out to me and say, hey, here's a new product we're working on and stuff, I obviously took a look at it. I think it's awesome. My first thought was like, why that market, right? Like it's such a, not specifically necessarily the course platform, but just like, let's say it's like a big generic branch of all those companies you listed. Like, what did you see when you looked at the landscape? It's like, hey, there's something big that's missing, and it's big enough that we need to develop a product to fit that problem.
Yeah, so essentially this comes back into looking at problems. So, as I mentioned, we have like access to a lot of companies. We talk to a lot of founders. We see behind the scenes on a lot of things. And there's a lot of problems that come up in Shopify, a lot of problems that come up in, people trying to run courses or people trying to build sales funnels and that sort of thing. And what we realized with Viper was it's not an essential product. You don't have to have Viper to run your business. So we were like, okay, how do we create something that's more sticky and more vital to a company to run? So we're like, okay, well, these are the problems we're seeing. This is what people are complaining to us about. Let's think about what product we can build to solve some of these problems, and also some of the opportunities that we can see in the horizon. So like, going digital, courses, paid memberships, and content gating, all that sort of stuff seems to be going in the right direction and seems to be an opportunity. Now, the ability for people to do that right now is quite hard. So if you can create something that makes it easier to do, charge people to access your blog, charge people to access your newsletter or whatever, easily collect payments, that sort of stuff, things that, people might struggle with regularly or need a developer or need someone who's like very tech savvy to figure out for them. If we can lower that barrier to entry on that, more people can do this thing that seems to be building traction, but only a few companies are doing because it's hard to set up. So it was a combination of building something that was more sticky, identifying problems from clients, users of Viper, and just people in the industry that we talk to. And then 3, just wanting to work on something that's a little bit more interesting. It was something that we haven't really tackled yet. And, I wish that I did have something that was easy to, do all the things that we're going to try and do with this. And it was in one place. And, I think in general, it's way more interesting to me than working on, Viper, for example, because I've been doing that for the last 3 years. I want something new. I want something interesting. And as long as you set that infrastructure up, then you can move to the next thing.
So in an ideal world, like a year or two from now, what does Hiax as a platform look like? Like, who's getting the most value out of it? Who's using it? Like where does kind of the future look like?
Yeah, so I think the easiest way to think of it is we're trying to position it like the Shopify for digital products. So everybody's kind of got e-commerce running. Like, California or Los Angeles has the highest density of e-commerce Shopify store owners. And so that it's pretty easy now to set up an e-commerce store compared to what it used to be. Like back in the day when you had to like figure out Magento, you had to like, do your own fulfillment, manufacturing, the barrier to entry to that has lowered a lot. Now we're looking at kind of like, okay, well, things are moving more digital and content is everywhere, but it's hard to differentiate good content from bad content. So the good content guys like, New York Times and those sorts of people are now charging for their content. That seems like an opportunity, but the barrier to entry is still pretty high on that. So how do we decrease the barrier to entry on that industry and create a solution to that problem? So I think that's where we're trying to position it, kind of like the Shopify for digital products. We're primarily going after creators who already have good content because you need to have good content in order to monetize it. So I think that's where we want to sort of be. And then we are probably going to tackle the e-commerce and physical product side, but we definitely want to focus on the digital first, just because we see a lot of opportunity there. And there's a lot of feedback that we get on people using things like Thinkific and Teachable and that sort of stuff, where there's areas for improvement and growth. And, they're really big companies now, so it's hard to pivot. It's hard to test crazy new ideas and things. So they're probably just, increasing at a steady rate, which they're super happy about. But, they're not going to fully change up the way that they do things just to give it a test. So I think there's opportunity there. And, it is a really big market as more and more people create more and more content and people want to start monetizing that content.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a big opportunity where you have, especially like the influencer side, you have lots of people who have lots of eyeballs and ears, but a majority of them have no clue how to actually make money. Like it's a very interesting problem that I don't think's ever existed before in history, where you have so many people who have such massive reach, but didn't get there with that intention. Like a lot of these people on TikTok or Instagram, whatever, like didn't start out, I think, with the intention of like, I want to build a business. It's like, I posted funny videos where I do motivational stuff, whatever it is, and like people resonate with it, and I have 10 million followers. Like, I probably should figure out how to make money doing this. And so, I mean, yeah, definitely a huge opportunity there of, how do you get those people to be able to create premium versions of their, kind of their ecosystem that's more intimate or more valuable, more engaging. I think the struggle for those people, and this is not related to you, but like the struggle with a lot of what's happening is people are getting famous and getting massive audiences, but the thing they're getting famous and building audiences for really don't have a clear translation into anything marketable, like that can make money. Like I think if you're a comedian or a singer or an actor, like those are types of people that can use these platforms to parlay into like Netflix specials and movies and all this stuff like that. There's a clear path there. But like a lot of people, other than that, it's like you go viral for making silly videos. Like it becomes difficult to like, well, how do I charge people for that? Like, do I sell t-shirts? Like that's kind of the go-to. I'm just going to sell t-shirts. I'm going to do a sponsorship deal. And like, it's tough. Like that's going to be a big market there, is monetizing influence more effectively.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing is that, there's not a lot of education on this either. Like, e-commerce is so well documented. The processes, very outlaid by so many different experts who are teaching e-commerce stores, even e-commerce Shopify stores, how to get started, how to find products, how to market it, even like, down to like running the Facebook ads. Like you and me know, like there's so many courses and things on that, but there's not a huge amount of content out there or a huge amount of education out there on like, okay, if you have 2 million Instagram followers, all right, how do you turn this into a business where you're not having to chase down sponsorship deals every week? You're not have to get brands to give you free product for you to turn your feed into a bunch of, promotional posts. So I don't know. It'll be interesting, and I think the consumer will get smarter again, as they always do, and they'll start being like, okay, this influencer's sold out to this company. They're like now posting for Nestle or something. So I think the consumer will start getting smarter and smarter, and they'll start spotting that brand product placement. They'll start, losing followers because of these brands selling out, because you can only take so many sponsorship deals before you start taking some of the deals that maybe are questionable for your personal brand. And your followers maybe not like that. So I think giving, these influencers and these people creating content different ways to monetize is definitely interesting. And it's something that we're interested in figuring out too, because it's a massive problem that nobody's really figured out, or nobody's solving the solution to that easily. Yep. The other thing is, I think, what was I going to say? Around the courses, so many people have skill sets that they can teach others, but they can't mass distribute it, or they don't even know how to. So, Thinkific and Teachable and those guys took the first step. They did a great job. But then how do you take that to the next level and create even more personalized courses, contents, and communities? How do you create, a monthly recurring model instead of just a one-time payment for a course? How do you upsell products from your course? That sort of stuff. So coming at it from a marketer's perspective and taking the marketing ideas out of the creator and just being like, hey, this is what you need to do, enable this feature, and you're going to make an extra $50 per person who comes into your course. Thinking about how you can help people that way also opens up opportunities for them, as well as obviously the platform building the solution to it.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I'll call it now. I was just thinking about this. Like, Joe Rogan in the next year teaches a masterclass on how to start a podcast and how to generate income as that. Like, if they're not working on it already, it's gonna happen. It's like the perfect masterclass. I was just thinking about it as you're talking, like,
for sure,
because he's the guy who's basically figured out, how do I turn this massive platform into a way to get ridiculously wealthy without really selling out. Like, in the early days, he would do some reads back in the early days, but like, I mean, at least not that I'm aware of, an episode I've seen, there's no ad units. There's nothing like popping in there. Like, he's reading, every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes. Like, the dude just has 3-hour conversations with really smart and entertaining people. And he's been smart enough to figure out, how do I turn that into something I can sell for, $100 million and make me very, very successful financially, even though he was already, very, very well off before then. But that's my prediction here on our interview. So that happens the next year.
Nice. But that also brings in an important thing that we were talking about before. He diversified his income. He had multiple revenue streams. So he had the time and the persistence to build the Joe Rogan podcast. Yeah. Because, he's been doing that for such a long time to get to the point of selling it for $100 million. Like, you're not just going to get there after 10 episodes. So
1,500 plus.
You can't. Yeah. And so it's taken him a long time, and you can't support yourself on, nothing. So he had those extra revenue streams. It allowed him to be creative, allowed him to do something different, stand out, and gave him the resources to also accelerate it. So, just if anybody listening takes one thing away from this, diversify those income streams if you can. It'll open up a lot of opportunities for you.
Love it. So I think that's a great place to wrap it up and call it an episode. For anybody that's watching and listening right now, that's heard you talk about, Viper and Hyaks and some things you're working on, what's the best place for them to go? And I'm sure it's going to be very, very basic to what you'd expect it to be, I'd imagine. But let's just, if you want to share a little bit about those two things and where people can check it out and learn more.
Yeah, sure. So you can literally just go to Jack Paxton, see all the projects I'm working on. We have an e-commerce ad agency, topgrowthmarketing.com, and then Viper, giveaways, contests, that sort of stuff. It's just viper.ai. Hyaks is brand new. We're still only released to friends and family. There's a waiting list building up. That's just at hyaks.com, hyx.com. And if you have any follow-up questions, or you just want to ask me anything at all, feel free to just shoot me an email. I'm super on top of my email, so just jack@hyaks.com. And I'd be more than happy to, give you anything that you need, or any feedback, or, answer any questions you have.
Awesome, man. Well, I am not on top of my email, so it's nice that one of us has that figured out. Mine's a just black hole of unread emails. But man, it's always great when we get to catch up and chat. Definitely will have you back on again. Maybe after the Hiax launch, we can have another chat and hear how amazing it's going, and I'll be able to share. I know we're going to test it out, share some of our findings and feedback and all that good stuff. So again, thank you so much, man. I know you were Airbnb house. Thanks for going outside and making it work, and it sounded great. It looked good. Wasn't too bad. No, the audio was great. It was better than a lot of guests that I've had, which is impressive. So thanks again, dude. And we will see everyone same time, same place next week. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, mate. See you soon.